The words hung in the air, sharp and discordant, cutting through the warm hum of family celebration. "Don't worry, Dad," my sister chirped, her voice dripping with saccharine false reassurance. "I've already made sure all your bills are paid. And I've got your bank accounts on autopay now, so nothing will slip through your fingers again." The jovial atmosphere in our parents' dining room, usually thick with the smell of roasting lamb and a comfortable sort of chaos, suddenly felt brittle, as if a single wrong move could shatter it into 1,000 pieces. Dad, his face still flushed from the candles on his meticulously decorated cake, froze mid-reach. The silver cake knife clattered against the ceramic plate, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden hush. His eyes, usually twinkling with amusement, darted between my sister's triumphant smile and the untouched slice of cake on his plate, a flicker of something akin to confusion, then dawning comprehension, washing over his features. It was the look of a man realizing he'd been gently, insidiously, dispossessed in his own home, on his own birthday. That look, the stunned silence that followed, was the culmination of years of silent observation, of a slow, simmering understanding of the woman my sister had become. It wasn't a sudden transformation, it was a gradual erosion of empathy, a steady accretion of entitlement. I remember when Mom was diagnosed, barely 6 months into the chemo. She'd called us both to the living room, her voice weak, her hands trembling slightly as she sorted through insurance paperwork. My sister, Amelia, had been more interested in the gleam of the diamond on her own finger, a gift from her new fiancé, than in the stark reality of Mom's medical bills. While I sat beside Mom, holding her hand, offering what little comfort I could, Amelia was scrolling through her phone, occasionally interjecting with a dismissive, "Oh, that's terrible, Mom," before launching into a detailed account of her bridal shower planning. Later that week, when we were sorting through Mom's old jewelry, Amelia accidentally pocketed a pearl necklace that Mom had always cherished, the one Dad had given her for their anniversary. She'd claimed she'd forgotten it was there, her eyes too bright, her excuse too flimsy to argue with. Then there was the incident after Grandma passed. Grandma had always been a bit of a packrat, a hoarder of memories and trinkets. The house was a treasure trove of knickknacks, each with a story. While I painstakingly went through boxes, labeling items for donation, keeping a few sentimental pieces, Amelia arrived with a large duffel bag and a steely determination. She spent hours sifting through the attic, emerging with armfuls of what she deemed valuable, tossing aside anything that didn't immediately scream resale potential. She didn't ask, she didn't inquire about sentimental value, she simply claimed. "It's just clutter, darling," she'd said to me, gesturing with a dusty porcelain figurine, "someone else can enjoy it. And frankly, it's just taking up space." She sold off half of Grandma's antique teacup collection for a fraction of its worth to an online dealer, boasting about the smart move she'd made to our parents, who were still reeling from their own grief. The subtle manipulation, the casual disregard for sentiment, it was all there, a pattern woven into the fabric of her interactions. She saw needs as opportunities, and kindness as weakness to be exploited. The banking issue started subtly. Dad, bless his trusting heart, had always been the one to manage their finances. He was methodical, careful. But as he got older, his eyesight started to fail, and the labyrinthine online banking portals became a frustration. Amelia, ever the helpful daughter, had offered to just set up some automatic payments for him. Dad, relieved, had agreed. I'd felt a prickle of unease then, a familiar tightening in my chest, but I'd dismissed it. Amelia was his daughter, she wouldn't, would she? The unease grew when Dad mentioned he couldn't access his account online anymore. Amelia had a vague explanation about security updates and simplified access for him. She'd taken over the management of their credit cards, too, always presenting them with meticulously organized statements, subtly highlighting her good work in managing their expenses. The narrative she was weaving was one of benevolent stewardship, of a dutiful daughter stepping in to assist her aging parents. And so, we arrived at Dad's 75th birthday. The cake, a towering confection of chocolate and salted caramel, sat on the polished mahogany table. My mother, beaming, had just finished singing. Dad's face, creased with a lifetime of laughter and love, was flushed with happiness. He'd just made a toast, his voice a little shaky but full of emotion, thanking us for being there. That's when Amelia chimed in, her voice a little too loud, a little too bright. The words Abu T bank accounts, about autopay, tumbled out like a carefully rehearsed monologue. It wasn't just the content, it was the delivery. There was a smugness in her posture, a theatrical flourish as she leaned back in her chair, her eyes meeting mine with a challenge. It was as if she was unveiling her grandest achievement, a coup de grace delivered with a champagne flute in hand. Dad's hand, reaching for the cake knife, faltered. The sound of it hitting the plate was like a discordant note in a symphony, silencing the joy. He looked at Amelia, then at the cake, then back at Amelia. The joviality drained from his face, replaced by a slow dawning horror. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. I saw it then, the calculated cruelty, the absolute lack of empathy. It was pure, unadulterated triumph, masked as filial duty. The air in the room grew heavy, thick with unspoken accusations and the cloying sweetness of the cake. Mom's smile faltered, her gaze shifting between her husband and her daughter, a dawning confusion clouding her usually serene expression. In that instant, something shifted within me. The years of quiet endurance, of swallowing my reservations, of trying to maintain family harmony, evaporated. The shock on Dad's face, the sheer audacity of Amelia's declaration, it was a line crossed, irrevocably. I didn't yell. I didn't confront her with angry words. My blood ran cold, and a strange, chilling calm settled over me. I watched her, perched on the edge of her seat, a predator savoring her moment. I knew, with a certainty that vibrated through my bones, that this was the moment to act. Later that evening, after Dad had retreated to his study, a shadow of his former self, and Mom was fussing over him, a knot of worry in her stomach, I called my lawyer. I explained the situation, the subtle maneuvers, the pattern of entitlement, and the recent, undeniable evidence of control over my parents' finances. He listened patiently, his voice calm and professional. He didn't judge, he simply advised. The next morning, I went to my parents' house. Amelia wasn't there, she'd likely gone out to celebrate her victory. I found Dad in the kitchen, nursing a cup of tea, his shoulders slumped. Mom was in the garden, tending to her roses, her movements slow and methodical. I sat down opposite Dad, placing a discreet folder on the table between us. Dad, I said, my voice even, I know this is difficult. But I think it's time we took back control. I opened the folder. Inside were documents I'd meticulously prepared over the last few months, at my lawyer's suggestion, a comprehensive overview of Amelia's financial dealings with our parents, copies of bank statements I'd managed to access through a carefully worded request to the bank manager, and, most importantly, a power of attorney document that I, as a concerned child, was having executed by Dad, giving me the authority to manage their finances and secure their assets. I also had a pre-drafted letter for the bank, outlining my sister's unauthorized access and requesting immediate revocation of any permission she'd been granted. I slid the power of attorney towards Dad. This, I explained, will allow me to act on your behalf. It's temporary, of course, and only until we have everything sorted out. It's to protect you, Dad. To make sure your money is yours. He looked at the document, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for a pen. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. The look of betrayal he'd worn yesterday was still etched in his eyes, but now it was mixed with a flicker of hope, a desperate plea for protection. He signed it without hesitation. Then, I handed him the bank letter. Sign this, please. I'll take care of the rest. He signed that too. The quiet click of the pen as he finished was the loudest sound in the room. I spent the next few days on the phone, meticulously revoking Amelia's access to every account, every bill, every financial avenue she had infiltrated. I changed passwords, updated contact information, and ensured that any future transactions would require my direct authorization. I didn't send her texts. I didn't call her. I simply executed the plan. The first sign of her realization came a week later. It was a series of frantic texts, escalating from confused questions about a missed payment on her credit card, which I had now taken over, to outright accusations. What did you do? One read, followed by, Dad said you've been messing with his accounts. This isn't funny, you know. Then came the family texts, the flying monkeys. My aunt, always quick to side with the more flamboyant personality, called me, her voice laced with concern. "Oh, darling, Amelia is so upset. She says you've cut her off from helping Dad with his finances." She was just trying to help. I calmly explained, she was not helping, Aunt Carol. She was taking over. Amelia's fury was palpable, expressed through increasingly desperate messages to anyone who would listen. She tried to play the victim, the wronged daughter whose good deeds were being punished. But the carefully documented paper trail, the executed power of attorney, and the sheer audacity of her initial announcement on Dad's birthday spoke louder than her fabricated narrative. The financial institutions were unyielding. There was no room for her emotional blackmail. The social consequences were swift and brutal. Friends she'd cultivated through shared financial opportunities suddenly became scarce. The easy access to her parents' funds had been her lifeline, her status symbol. Without it, her carefully constructed facade began to crumble. She was isolated, her entitlement finally catching up to her. I heard through the grapevine that she'd had to sell her designer handbag collection to cover her own debts. A small, quiet satisfaction bloomed within me. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about restoring order, about protecting my parents, about ensuring that their final years were not dictated by my sister's insatiable greed. The silence that followed her frantic attempts to regain control was deafening, a testament to the quiet, precise demolition of her ego. The cake, uneaten on Dad's birthday, felt like a distant memory, the true feast having been served much later, in the stillness of absolute consequence.